Welcome to the second annual Shining Mountain Alternative Education Forum. Last year we talked about how to get quality education to all kids, whether they're in private schools or public schools. We had a very nice discussion after the panel spoke, so I really encourage all of you, if you have a question of anyone up here, after we go on for about a half hour or so, please step up to the mic and ask the question, and we'll do our best to answer. We have a few questions prepared, but we're open to any subject, any question that you might have about site-based management, or maybe you have some other questions about alternative education or education in general, I suppose. Right at the end of the table is Tom Garrett. He's the co-chair of Sussex Alternative School in town. Next to him is Virginia DeLand. She's the president of Shining Mountain School. Next to her is Ed Courtney, principal at Lowell School in District 1. Nancy Keenan is to his right. She's the superintendent of public instruction for Montana. And Mike Vance is sitting next to me. He's the superintendent in charge of curriculum for District 1. And my name is Shaun Gant, and I'll moderate for these folks and keep them in mind. And I think we'll go until about, for about 45 minutes, so there's plenty of time for you to speak up too. And before we go with the questions, Mike has a little pre-test for you and the audience.
This is something that's just a thing of mine, and I'd like each of you to raise your hand, if you will, on one of these three statements, and if you don't, I have some kind of a current under your seat and it'll pop you right out. So, how many of you would consider yourselves now mostly in favor of the local school making most of the choices? Roughly, let's say 60 to 100% of the time, most of the time. How many of you, by a show of hands, would?
As opposed to what?
Well, as opposed to a model which is more current now, in which schools at the local level make some choices, but when it comes to lots of choices, they're made at the central district level and or the board level. What we're going to be talking about is a process by where the schools will have the opportunity to make more of those choices with the people closer to the scene of the action making those choices. Given that rough view of it, how many of you would say you would be in favor of that from what you know? Let's do that. Okay.
Is the board in on the panel in on this, or
Well,
just them? Okay.
That's fine if you want to. So how many of you would see yourselves in a middle group? Maybe not real sure yet, don't have a lot of information about it. A group of about, let's say 41% to 59% that would could go either way, want to know some more information, but you're obviously curious about it. Okay? And how many of you just don't think it's worth a hoot at all? And how many of you thought this was a French film and you're wondering how you're going to get out? Okay.
Okay. There'll be a post test afterwards too, so you'll have your chance to re-vote, I think. The first question that came to my mind when I started thinking about this subject, about site-based management, or some people call it school-centered decision-making, was the definition. And from what I've read, there are a lot of definitions depending on different schools. I've asked the people on this panel how they would define site-based management, and what they might rename that kind of awkward term if they could, I guess, and why they defined it that way, and why they would call it what they would call it. So maybe I'll start with you, Nancy. You don't mind?
Well, I would call it site-based decision-making right off the bat, because it says, or site-based management, because it says management. Management as we know it, you manage somebody else, and so I prefer to call it either school-centered decision-making or site-based decision-making, so that you get a word away from the word management, because management means control of all sorts of things from somebody else, so just in renaming it. To me, when we talk about site-based decision-making, it brings to mind for me empowering school staff to create the conditions in the school that facilitate improvement, innovation, and professional growth, and staff to include, if there's a principal and staff, and then the parent and community. So you can do that all sorts of ways, but it is truly to improve the conditions of that school. You replace the bureaucracy with professional responsibility, and when you increase that autonomy, separate of a central office as we know it now, when you increase that school autonomy, you assume the responsibility then for results. And so you actually say, this is results driven, and you're going to be accountable for it now as parents, as school teachers, as principals and administrator in that building, as a group of people for your school. So that's how I see it, very different than it's operating right now.
Well, can I follow up a little bit on that? If you put the responsibility on an advisory board or the community that's involved, how do you hold them accountable then for the results of their decisions?
As state superintendent or?
As a state superintendent or parent, you can pick, I guess.
There's probably two realms. One, that we have accreditation standards that speak to certain things that we expect kids to know. So I think any school still has to have goals and some kind of outcome to look at in the sense of what kids should know. How do parents do it? I think actively involved. And when we take a look at, if our goal is, once you've set goals, and you said, this is by the time our kids leave this school, these are our expectations of those kids, and we have certain expectations at certain levels, then you've got to find a way to measure those. I'm not a big believer in standardized tests, but I am a big believer in portfolios, so that parents can say, we said we'd like them to know these things, and does he or she know them? And if they don't, then you've got to revisit what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong, and take a look at that curriculum again. Under this umbrella of what we say kids by the time they graduate from high school should know. And not to put them in boxes, say by second grade you have to know all A, B, C, D, but to say developmentally, how do we get them there, and then how do we measure that in a portfolio kind of format, and parents are part of that.
Okay. Ed, do you have things to add to that, or a differing definition?
Not too much. I think you covered it pretty well there, but there are so many different definitions of site-based or school-based management or school-based improvement or however you want to label it. It's just very simply to me, and I wrote down probably a dozen different definitions, and finally a fellow by the name of Carl Marlberger who has written a number of things about site-based management. I found a quote of his, and he said it's just simply a process that involves decision-making at a level where it'll be implemented. And of course, I think its purpose is school improvement. It has to be that. Anything else, I think we're spinning our wheels, and it's a waste of time, I believe. And it has to involve parents, and it has to involve school staff, and oftentimes may involve children or students in the decision-making process. At Lowell School, and you got a copy of our bylaws there. We've got a whole list of about 16 different people there that are involved with us on our advisory council, and it involves other representatives from the community, from the University of Montana. We have a minority representative that's elected by our parents. And so it involves an awful lot of different people in that decision-making, and I think responsibility for it and accountability for it is very important. We have to be real careful there. Another name for it would be school-based improvement. I like that because I like the word improvement, and that stresses the fact that it's a process aimed at helping kids. And to me, that's the bottom line. is what will it do for children. It's got to be good.
Virginia, can you take a stab at this one?
Well, actually, I didn't come up with a good name. I came up with a few things that I know that I would not like it to be. And I would really like to get away from the kind of education jargon that separates the community and families from the school world, that you really don't understand until somebody in education sits down and explains to you what it is. So I'd like it to be fairly simple. I'd like it to be straightforward. And the other thought I had was that in a real sense, we're talking about taking the term neighborhood school to the next level in a sort of evolutionary process. We started with the concept of neighborhood schools. We all tend to believe that they're pretty good, but we're talking about moving it further along than we had ever taken it before.
When I think about whatever it's labeled school-based improvement or whatever the label would be, the issue that seems most important to me is that the people who will be affected by the decisions are somehow involved in the decisions. It seems dangerous to set some kind of a flat rule that would say parents will make the decisions or teachers will make the decisions, but I think it's reasonable to think that as the community becomes more involved, there will be times where clearly the parents ought to have decision-making authority. There will be other times in which maybe the community members would be more of advisors, and some other person would take the role of decision-making. But there's in my experience, there's always one missing piece, and maybe my brief time at Sussex has led me to see the importance of this, and that is that the students, I think, really should be empowered to be decision makers. If you are going by the guideline that whatever your school improvement plan is, it should be one in which the decisions are made by the people who are affected by them. So more, I guess I'd like to emphasize the need to include students in any plan to improve the schools, because they, more than anyone else, are affected by it. Certainly there are developmental limits on where you would allow the students into the decision-making process, but surprisingly, we at Sussex have been very successful with students involved in hiring of staff, hiring of teachers, hiring of me, director, and financial issues, all of those things that are traditionally thought of as somehow beyond the realm of children, they handle quite effectively, and they are directly affected by them, so they should be included.
Right. Mike, do you have things to add to that?
Yes.
It's kind of hard to be a caboose, probably.
No, I'll try to hitch on to that and see what I can do. We have to be really careful in schools about jargon, about new names for new things to do, because in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were all kinds of different names to programs that were going to make some great change, and some did, and many didn't. I would call this school-centered choices, or empowering teachers and principals and parents and kids at the crux of what happens, which is in the classroom level. And I think the basis for any kind of movement has to be on some demonstration that students will learn more, teachers will teach better, the attitude of the school will be more positive, there will be outcomes that show that, and as well as the outcomes, there will be a feeling in that school of energy and vitality. And I think that if that's not shown, then there's a lot of dubious folks out there. Just one other quick point. John Goodlight in the 1960s and Seymour Saracen in the 60s and 70s kept saying that the school was the unit for change, that the individual school is where it takes place. And what they also said that people didn't hear as clear is that each school is different. I've been in this work for 28 years, and I've never been in a school that's like another school. And what we have to really watch out for, I think, in the zest that comes for any kind of new term, is that there's some formula that's going to be dropped on this school that's going to suddenly make it much different. Schools are all different, their personalities, their culture, the way it works, and so we hope to tailor the school-centered work to the needs, the profile, what the staff, the principals, parents, students, kids see as the profile needs of that school, and then you tailor it, and then you make it come alive for that place, and then it's owned in that place, and it's not something that's brought down from some mountain, but it's something that's built up at the base level, ground up.
Okay. Well, going along with that, then, would your method of electing a board, and I'm not going to call it a parent board anymore after what you said, Tom, but electing an advisory board for a school that wanted to become a site-based managed school. I'm saying that because I can't say all of your ideas at once. Would you elect those representatives, or would you hire them? Would you pay them? What method of getting these people together would you use?
Well, I would leave it almost entirely to the individual school. I would not have any district formula that this is the way it's done. I think we're talking about parents and teachers and building principals who care about kids and who want to be there. And in some cases, they could be voted in by their peers. In some cases, they could be take it on for a quarter and then switch. In some cases, they could be active PTA members. In some cases, they could be someone who's moved in from some other state that's got some new ideas to share. So I think it really needs to be flexible, and I think it really needs to be, as I said before, tied in to the picture, to the vision of what that school has. And if that school doesn't have a place where it wants to go, it doesn't matter how many counselors you have.
Anybody else?
Yeah, but if you're talking about truly site-based or community-centered, then it's got to be individual. You can't have a formula. You can't just say, okay, this is what we're going to do in Montana, or this is what we're going to do in Missoula. But there have to be consistent components. And there's some questions that districts need to ask, because I think it's pretty tough that if you don't want, as we were visiting here, if you don't have a superintendent support, or you don't have school board support, and you have a school out here that thinks this is a wonderful idea, it's going to be pretty tough to actually move that power from that central office to that school. So there has to be discussions district-wide. That has to happen. But some questions also, I think, that need to be asked and in part in some research that I did. What does that mean? What does that mean to that school? What does site-based decision-making mean to that school, those parents, teachers, administrators? You have to ask that question. You then have to say, what are our roles? What's my role as a teacher? What's yours as a parent? What's yours as an administrator? And so that we all are on common ground here when we talk about who's doing what and what are our roles. What are the limitations, expectations, and the parameters of this decision-making we're going to do? What do we know about change? And I think that's a critical one, because if you read the research on site-based decision-making, you better be real clear on how people accept or are going to deal with change. Now, we don't like change. Because I want change, by golly, but it's going to be you. It's not going to be me that's going to change. It's going to be you that changes. And so school boards say, you change, and that debate goes on. We have to then talk about how are we going to handle this change? How are we going to prepare people for the change? How are we going to be in a discussion about change, not only at this school, but at the central office? Because I can change at my school. The central office says, we're not changing. We're still going to make the decisions up here. And so this doesn't happen in a year. It happens probably over 5 and 10 years. It happens with a lot of talking and discussion, and I don't think there's any formula. And so you can't say how you're going to pick the parents, how you're going to pick the school board members. That's got to happen right there with lots and lots of discussion at the local school level and then at the district level as well.
Well, I think we ought to ask Ed then. Maybe you could share a little bit about Lowell School and how that evolved, how that came about at your school.
And Mike and Nancy, that's correct. You've got to have it come from within. You know, you can't come from up on high somewhere and like a bolt of lightning and expect everybody to turn to and change like that. Teaching is a real difficult occupation. You people who have done it before, you know what I mean. And it gets, we get into, sometimes we get in ruts, and I'm a former teacher, and I can tell you I've gotten into a lot of them. The thing is that we get real comfortable with what we're doing. And then we get into something like, we have at Lowell School, for instance, where we have alternative classrooms, we've combined classrooms, first and second, and third and fourth and fifth grades, and we've done away with grading for the most part, except in a couple of traditional classrooms, and that plan came from staff, and that's why I think it's so successful. And it came also from parents, and I wasn't in on the ground floor of it. This is only my second year at Lowell School, but 4 years ago, the dream started, and it started materializing, and the staff got some training and came back and trained other staff members and got them really jacked up over what could be done for our Lowell students. They perceived a need for our students. It might be unique. I'm not sure it is. But some people say that we have unique needs over there that maybe they don't have over somewhere else, and that's an argument against this type of thing for some people. But that's what we did, and what they did, and what we're doing now is that we're trying to make, we know that our kids have needs, and we know that perhaps in a more traditional manner that we're trying to address those needs, we weren't all that successful. We have tremendously high turnover of students at Lowell School, and that in itself was reason, I think, to change the program somewhat. And we feel it's working really well. We've got a long ways to go, but we feel it's working quite well. Our advisory council, I believe, was developed. It kind of came along with it, and they spent the whole year. If you picked up the bylaws that were handed out there, I had about 50 of them, so I'll get one if you didn't. They spent the whole year putting this together, hammering this thing out, and how and what the goals would be, and the objectives, and how the members would be chosen. We elect the teachers. We elect parents. Parents elect parents. We send on a ballot. People interested in being on an advisory council, get their name on the ballot. We send it out with all our kids, and we get the vote back, and they're elected that way. Teachers elect representatives on there. We appoint community members. We appoint people from the university. We have 2 university professors that are on the advisory council. As I said, we have a person who represents our minority students. I think we have about 51 of them at Lowell, and we felt that their needs needed to be addressed too. And so we have a parent who will address those and maybe help us serve those children better than what we have been. And I can't say enough for Lowell School, but I can't say enough for our council either. And we're moving in the direction of more site-based management. I don't think we're right there yet. We talk about, somewhere in here, the question was, what are the most important things for them to get involved in, curriculum or budget or personnel, wasn't hiring, yeah. If you look at this bylaws, they're really getting into hiring personnel. And they interviewed me for the job and made the recommendation. We're talking now in our bylaws about, and it's been okayed by the board, that the advisory council can actually get involved in the interview process of hiring teachers. I think that's good. They know what kind of people we need over there. They know for our program, and they have a real good feeling for the program. And it also makes them a part of the team. And that's another key word, is team. That's what we are over there. We consider ourselves to be a team with the parents.
So you say that kind of happened organically? I mean, the staff and the parents?
It's all kind of evolved into this thing out of the need that's perceived. And any school can do it, and I don't think that they have to do it the way we did it, or have to do it as extensively as we have done it. But you see a need and you address the need. That make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Makes sense to me.
Thanks. Well, let me go on to another question here. For you, Tom, since you were kind of a real tight unit, all your teachers there, and you're the administrator with Santa Winston, but you're also including kids and the teachers all the time. What kind of training do you think would be important for a school that wanted to keep the momentum going, because research shows that a lot of times the task can be overwhelming, and maybe the right person doesn't volunteer for this quarter. How do we address that? How do we make sure that everybody has the skills that they need to be accountable for what they create? Is that kind of a big question?
No, I can deal with that. The idea of having people come into it already equipped to solve some problems or to deal with situations that don't yet exist, I think that's too much to ask. What seems to me more appropriate is that as people become involved, they begin to see what their strengths are, what their skills are, where they can best facilitate the process, and that is that's empowerment. That's where the teachers, the students, the parents, administrators recognize to the best of their judgment who has the talents or skills that we need in this particular situation, and those are the ones who then maybe take charge of whatever they're dealing with at the moment. It might not be the administrator who has the best ability to lead the school through some situation. It may be that those skills evolve, that as the group works together, a professional responsibility to stay informed and stay current with what's happening in research and happening in other schools. Teachers will learn new skills. Teachers or parents or any of the people involved will go beyond what they had in mind even when they began. I think the crux of it is that it continues to be a flexible, responsive organization, not something that maybe is created through a grassroots movement and then solidifies into some new structure, but it continues to grow and change as the needs grow and change, and as the people involved in it come and go, the nature of the organization may change. It's organic.
Mike said a wonderful thing to me when we were talking about the subject. He said, when you give power away, then it just comes back. You know, that it's not something that you give away and then it's lost. Or and different people have different kinds of power, and when you combine that, then maybe, like you say, the right things happen at the right times by the right people, and then that's an evolutionary process too. Virginia, would you like to talk about our school a little bit, how that's evolved, or how parents have filled those gaps? And
Well, when you talk about the public schools and putting the fear of change, there's a real basic difference between that and an alternative school where families have come together because they have insisted on that kind of change. That's what we've opted for. And so already you have a group of people that are committed to site-based management. My experience as a parent and in my job was with special education. And so when I arrived at school with my younger daughter, and I was not an equal part or even on the team, I was upset. So I immediately started thinking along other lines. I think most of us did. When our school started out, we came together with a fairly large group of people who all had varying ideas. We had a range of people, from people on the left who wanted no organization and no structure, with the children designing the curriculum totally and setting all of the rules to the school, to the right, to people who eventually said, we can't live with something where kids are having morning meetings. This is an adult role. And so we spent the last 3 years defining ourselves and deciding who we are. And what we decided was that we are a group of people who are working in sort of a collaborative fashion, that it isn't just teachers or just parents or even a combination of that, but it's all of us who are involved in the school. I think most alternative schools sort of arrive at that place. Our students have morning meetings every morning. We're making decisions about the school. And while we didn't actively this time include them in a hiring, they were right in there kibitzing and giving us their opinion, whether we wanted it or not. And they ended up with a voice. But that was one of the things I was looking for when I started looking at alternative schools. I didn't want my children to know just how to follow directions. I wanted them to know how to make decisions. And you can't learn that if you never get a chance to do it.
maybe I could jump back to training, empowering people too, and maybe Nancy or Mike, you have some suggestions about agencies or training that's in place now that schools could turn to get training for people that want to be involved and start things up. I mean, Lowell's an example.
Well, we're not all the way there either. You know, we need the training too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was really a joy because I happened to be sitting in my office in 1989 when about 20 of the Lowell staff members walked in for eyes like this, saying, we want to do things differently. And they not only said we want to do things differently, but they had a concept of what different was. And I think that is crucial for us. I mean, we are in the depths already of an information age, right? And we still have, by and large, factory model schools. By and large, we still have schools that are going through the steps with teachers feeling that their information is going to be meeting the needs of kids in the 21st century. And that just doesn't fly. Because, well, I just looked up a couple of facts. There are 40,000 articles published each week, and that knowledge is doubling every 19 months. 40,000 articles published each week. And here's one that caught my eye. The class that graduates in the year 2000, that's the 5th grade class. I have a son in the 5th grade class. They are exposed in 1 year to as much information as their grandparents were exposed to in a lifetime. 1 year. And so when we talk about change, I don't see we have any choice. I mean, I think public schools are going down the drain if they don't look at this changing concept as the challenge and the way to, and I mean, there's not one the way to go, but many ways to go. Because I think a lot of parents are getting real caught up with the fact that their kids are coming to school at age 3, 4, and 5 ready to do really exciting things, and we've got a mindset blocked into something that they learned 2 years ago, and the kids have to go through it again. We can't do that. And so what it means in training it means that we work with principals and leaders of schools who are indeed people that lead. By that I mean they are working for consensus, they're in classrooms, they are problem-solving teams, and they realize that their nature is to stimulate all different kinds of interaction and ways for kids to learn how to learn. The contents that we use now in our schools are vehicles. I mean, it's important to know content, but they have to be the vehicles for how kids learn and come to get information, because the information is going to be totally different than they're using 20 years now, and so we have to in a planned way make a lot of changes which are really scary to people. It scares me, and really scary, because it's not the way we were brought up. I mean, I don't know how you were taught, but when I was taught, I sat in the room and they gave me some information and I fed it back to them. And that's just deadly. And most of our teachers that are teaching were taught that way. So we've got to turn it around.
Well, and just to add to that, it's staggering to me because I talk a lot about what's happening technologically with our kids, what's happening information-wise. There's no way we can, memorize the dates of World War II or whatever. I mean, folks, it's out there. Go look it up. Don't waste your time measuring it and memorizing it. Fact of the matter is, though, is that you don't do it outside the system. I don't think entirely. I don't think that we throw our hands up and say, well, throw this one, away in a handbasket. But that you have to work in part to change people's attitude. There's got to be a lot of changes that go on, and it's not just our teachers. And we need to change schools of education, and they're doing that. The new deans are talking about that all the time, about how we prepare teachers differently than how I was trained as a teacher. But keep in mind now, who's running your school board? Who's running schools? And those are people who came out of training after World War II that says put them in desks, put them in rows, keep them quiet, tell them what to think, and have it be given back to you. Now, until school boards' compositions change, to be, not cynical but honest, to have school administrators' training change, and so we have more Eds of the world that say, I'm willing to take a chance here, I'm willing to try things differently. Until we have teacher preparation change, we will continue to mobilize these kids as though they're in a factory, not thinking, just regurgitating, because that's how we were taught. And we gravitate to where that comfort level is. And it means getting involved. One, getting involved with local school boards. 2, getting involved with schools of education. 3, talking about what our vision is for education in this next century, instead of just saying, I don't like how you're doing it, so I'm going to just, go do it some other way. And yet we will never change the total of society and what's in the best interest of all children. And I think it should be our mission for all children, not just some that happen to be ours, but all children in Montana. How do we get folks to think differently and at least to have an open mind to it? I am so darn tired of hearing folks say to me, well, I had it, by golly, and if I did that in school good enough, it's good enough for my kid. And I'm sitting up in Ovando, Montana going, but it's not good enough for your kid anymore. It's a changing world. And so all of us that really think things should be differently need to get involved and speak up. Speak up, because it will continue to go this route until we take some ownership in speaking up and talking about it, which you have done wisely here today. So
This isn't the first time.
yeah.
Well, so what do I do? Do I get a PhD so that I feel qualified to go to the School of Education and give them my opinion, Or do I thank my stars that there's someone like you, Nancy, that's so accessible that you would come over here today and talk with us and maybe appeal to you to influence them? Or
I don't know. I think you just, some of those teachers up there. And I think you invite them for a cup of coffee. And you talk to them. And they're not all so regimented that I don't think that they're open to new ideas, but they also want to see interest from the community. We get isolated. So call some of your, I don't think you have to have a doctoral degree to have an opinion. I want to tell you.
I think also that some of the alternative schools can model some of these ideas and show that they do work. Sometimes, particularly with your guy who says, and I ran into this in the school my younger daughter was in, but this school has been doing this, and look at the kids we've been turning out, and haven't they been great? And what can you say but yes? Yeah, they were great, but my daughter is graduating in the year 2000, and she's going to live most of her life in another century. And I don't know a lot about it, but I do know a few things. She doesn't need to know great quantities of facts. She needs to know how to find what she needs to know. She needs a second language. The world today is no longer going to tolerate countries that don't have at least 2 or 3 languages. My mother-in-law went to Nepal, and she had a guide who spoke 11 languages, and he was 9. We're the last nation in the world that says we are English-speaking only.
And that's attitude.
That's attitude.
I met the business community today, and we're chatting about that. And if I say, we want foreign languages in our schools, and they'll say, that's great, but who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for it? And yet they say, but the young man or young woman that I have coming out of the public schools that had better be able to speak Portuguese or Spanish or French or German or Russian to be in the international market. We have not translated that there has to be an investment in this, folks, and it does not come free. And Montana folks, that's the bottom line.
Let's have something to add there.
Just very quickly, in the ideal sense, I think we have to be shooting for the kind of schools that could educate a guy like Mark Twain. Mark Twain said he never let his schooling interfere with his education. And we couldn't handle Einstein, and we have to set our sights higher, and we have to have all kinds of different ways that kids can learn. And I'm going to say something that is not going to be popular in some circles now, but generally speaking, my experience is that schools of education need to be out in public schools and in school districts, and they need to stop talking about some of these textbooks were written and this is going to do that and that's going to do this, and they need to get young people out in schools because teachers and parents and principals and lots of other folks have a gut feeling at the school level that there's really change. It's really different. And I don't see very many schools of education responding to those differences.
When I first, oh, go ahead.
You guys go for it.
I've got some good news for you. The University of Montana School of Education is really turning to now. I was on a screening committee for a professor. I interviewed two outstanding people. And the second one I didn't think could possibly beat the first one. And he is going to teach administrators. And that's something we need. We need people to teach us about this changing role of the administrator in the schools. We're not the boss, cracking the whip and the club and that kind of stuff anymore, or we shouldn't be, or even think that. But this fellow was sitting there and he was going through the interview and he was talking about, he came from, originally I think from Alabama, and he was talking, or Texas. I tried not to hold that against him. But he said these magic words like, I want to teach, I've been teaching administrators about whole language approach to teaching. I've been teaching, I have a class that deals with cooperative learning groups and how to supervise those. He talked about portfolio assessments and other types of assessments that are being looked at to take the place of the shelf tests that we give. I was really impressed with him, and they hired him, and I was really glad. So we have a person out there that's going to be teaching administrators about what's happening now in our schools and the trends. Someone else, I had a reading teacher that was hired out there, came and visited our school. And I told her that we're getting involved in portfolio assessment along with our narrative reports. And she said, I've been working on that for a long time. I'd like to teach some classes. And that was music to my ears and my staff's ears. It's about time we got somebody out there doing something like that. There are other teachers that are out there that are doing some great things. They're sending they're teaming out there now, and they're getting social studies and math and science, and Ralph Allen and Gene Lukowski and some of the others are putting their kids all together, and they're sending them to law school, and they're learning about the alternative classrooms, and they're getting involved in the integration of the curriculum and all of these trends. These are the trends in education right now. And research is showing that this is the best way to teach, and this is the best way to learn. And it's really neat that those guys out there at the university are finally doing something, and I feel real good about it.
The only thing I would add to that, which is a bit skeptical, is that it's one thing to talk about it, and it's once again a different thing to be out in the schools working with them doing it, and so it needs to happen both ways, I think, and if it doesn't, it gets shallow.
Yeah, I pulled together what's called the Council of Deans. First time in the history of this state that the deans of education from all the schools of education came together. And they were so excited about it. I thought, God, I can't believe you guys haven't gotten together, but hey, it's cool. All of them are new deans. Every one of them are not every one of them, 4 of the 5 are brand new deans. All fairly young, all very progressive, and all of them now talking about requiring their professors to be in schools.
Good.
And so I know it's happening in Missoula. I know Gene Lukowski is actually teaching.
Yeah, she's traded with one of our middle school teachers.
And so that's the other thing, that we have a whole new set of deans that are saying, I want to talk about early childhood education and how that's going to fit into our schools. I want to talk about non-graded K1, 2, 3 and how that's going to fit into our schools. So that's one level that I think the deans are moving. The second level is to get presidents of universities seeing that the schools of education merit some attention. And the last big cut, this last legislative session, guess where the university took a good chunk of that? Right out of schools of education. So they become the fall guy, if you will, for a lot of that budget balancing. And so in part it's not only talking schools of education, it's talking to our president here at University of Montana, and saying, schools of education are important. And I support them, and I think that the schools should support them as those folks try to move forward.
about to say something a while back, Virginia.
Totally lost it.
Okay. Well, you blew all my questions out of the water, too. It was really great. And we have still about 25 minutes left, so I think maybe we should be responding to the audience at this point, unless there's something else really pressing.
I'm going to say one very quick thing. We still tend to see school as a place rather than a concept or a lifelong process. And I'm seeing real exciting things happen with people in recreation departments and health departments and all kinds of folks who want to be involved in schooling in terms of what goes on in the schools, and so our concept of schooling has to, or should I think, be very, very broad and not a particular place, but more of a center of learning where people feel welcome. There are a lot of people yet that don't feel welcome in public schools, and that just burns me when I say it, because I know it's true. And public schools are just what they are, public schools, and should be open as often as they can be and used in those ways. And there's still some concepts there that we have to get through.
Did you remember?
Well, I thought of something else. But one of the things one of the questions you ask is how parents should be involved in this thing. All of the alternative schools that I know of here in Missoula require parent hours. I mean, it's not an option. It is required. Now, that is not a concept that would be easily carried over to a public school setting. But the one thing I did think of was that perhaps in order to get parents involved, you could have a system where you could perhaps give tax credits for parent hours that they actually put in school, and they got so many tax credits for hours that they gave to their school as an incentive.
Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if the business community said, you have an hour off, run down to the school and see how your kid's doing? I mean, tax incentives are great, but when are we going to get the business community in this state saying, by golly, schools are so important, your responsibility with your children is so important that we really believe you could take this hour and run down there and check it out. Spend some time as a reading parent or whatever it might be. But that has to happen as us having ownership of these schools as a business community as well.
Oh, I think that is absolutely true. But that required parent involvement has been one of the things that has made the alternative schools successful.
Yeah. Two very, very quick things. I could talk to me. One is that it's a very proven fact that when parents are involved in working with their kids at home, with their homework, and helping with their work in that way, that students do achieve more. There's just no doubt about it. That when parents are critical to that process, and sometimes parents don't recognize how important they are in that process. Second thought I lost.
Well, I really want to throw this out, because when I was reading this evaluation of Laurel School by a student principal who was there, I think Mike gave it to me. I forget what it's. The man's name is Tom Brennan.
He's a former principal.
Former principal. He said, I conducted a study to compare the incidences of aggression, disrespect, disturbance in classroom or playground, stealing, cussing, etc. for the school years 1989-90 and 1990-91. Now, that's the time where things changed, where there were more parents involved. I found that in 89-90 there was a total of approximately 339 acts of misbehavior reported, while in the year 90-91 only 154 acts of misbehavior were reported. That's like half. And it was also noted that acts of aggression were down from 202 to only 82. So I thought that was an amazing report card, I guess you call it, a piece in this portfolio about Lowell School and the success.
We still haven't gotten to quit cussing yet, but.
Yeah. Well, you've got to work on that harder. Are there any questions in the audience? Come on up. If you speak in the microphone, then your voice will carry better on videotape. This session is being taped for MCAT. So.
My name is Floyd Johnson, and I've greatly enjoyed this discussion. And before the question and answer begin, I just want to state that I've been doing some independent research at the university on the subject of distance learning. And I have a rather sizable body of information which I'm getting to the library in the next, Missoula Public Library in the next week or two. And I have some handouts which, after when the meeting's over, I would like to hand out to describing this material for whoever is interested.
There's a table out front with some other information. That would be a good place to put it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mary Dower, Dr. Mary Dower. I piled it high and deep a couple of years ago. And I serve as an education consultant, mostly in the United States, although I'm now in Mexico and England, or I will be in England in a couple of weeks. I've been very interested in hearing what you have to say. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. When I go into work within a school district, one of the very first things I do is get absolutely everybody involved, from the superintendent down to the janitor, all creating their common vision. What comes out in this is a great deal of apprehension, where as the hierarchy is torn away, there's a lot of fear about trusting the hierarchy. Oh, if I give my opinion, I'm just this first grade teacher and it's just my second year here, I'm not really going to be listened to. And that process of empowerment that you've been talking about is really the most interesting thing, because what it brings in is chaos. We have not been taught to deal with chaos. We have been taught that there's one way to think, one answer to give, and if we give anything else other than that, we're going to be marked wrong or we'll have dire consequences. And those of us involved in change, I think the most important things we can do to the people with whom we're dealing is that, hey, chaos is all right. It's a part of the process. It's a creative, energizing period from which the new paradigm, the new model, the new way that we want to evolve to which we want to evolve, that's okay. And also, as Mike was saying earlier, there is more than one way. There's not going to be one way to do this, and the more permission we give to people to say there is more than one way, let's deal with more than one way, let's honor and respect more than one way of expressing the way we want, then the change can happen, then the doors can open. The one school district, it's a K through 12 district in rural Washington State. The teachers said jokingly that first day that what they wanted to see was to put the superintendent in a treehouse. There were a lot of trees around. She happened to be in the room, and she thought this was pretty funny, and so she left the room and moved her office outside underneath the tree for the next month. And it was really quite interesting to see what happened, because the walls did start coming down from that one act.
I'd like to comment on what Mary said. It occurs to me that it also goes the other way. The fear that you mentioned was the fear of people in a hierarchical system who are somehow seen as having less power. They're afraid to voice their opinions because perhaps someone in more power, holding more power, might see it as wrong or somehow not acceptable. I think it goes the other way as well. The people who are traditionally in positions of decision-making and positions of power are, I'm sure, seriously frightened at sharing that, because they have no models, they have no experience in that, and they probably have no basis for trust. If you've been running an institution successfully according to old standards, and then someone changes the standards on you, you have to begin to maybe trust people that you didn't rely on before, and it's a frightening thing if you know what you can do effectively, and then someone says someone else will take over that part of your job for you, suddenly it's out of your control, and that's bound to be frightening. I was imagining the future shock syndrome of principals and superintendents suddenly faced with the idea that after X number of years being secure in their decision making, they now have to kind of bite their tongue and let decisions come from other places. They are bound to see parents, teachers, children as a threat, unless that trust is given time to mature and given some concrete expression along the way. It can't just suddenly be dropped on them that you need to function in this new way. The trust has to be honest, and it doesn't come overnight. In the alternative scenario, when trust exists, parents who were once a threat become an opportunity. The parent who might have walked through the door of the frightened principal with representing maybe some change that the principal wanted to avoid, now walks through the door and represents an opportunity for the principal to see more happen, because here are people with skills and talents who are more involved. But it won't happen without the opportunity to develop that trust.
That's really a point well made, Tom. And the leadership styles that make sense to me in the years to come are based on trust. We really have to look at our folks in charge, because we're asking people to make big leaps of faith, and we're going into unknown kinds of ways, and it really does mean, I think, that our leaders give up power. Less is more, and power is reconceived. And if James McGregor Burns was right in his book on leadership, which is just an outstanding book, he said that by giving it away, you get it. And it's through trusting people, and it's through building a sense of camaraderie and team, and a sense of a group of people who are focused on some plan, that they all say, this is what we want to work on. And people like me who push for change have to constantly keep in mind that it's so hard to change, and when you think about your own personal changes and how hard they are, it's easier to mouth it than to see it carried off. But it has been carried off in many schools. It happens in many schools where a leader builds the trust, change is possible, trust is there, and people stretch in new ways, and they get out of that well, I'm going in my room and teach, and the whole partnership thing just brings a whole lot of power. So that I think is a way to look at it. But I called 5 of our principals before I came here. By our, I mean I called 5 in school. District 1, and I just posed the question. I said, I'm going to be on a panel tonight, and like to have some thoughts about your feelings and your staff's feelings about school-centered sorts of ideas. And every person in some way said, well, let's don't be going, too fast here. Let's make sure that when we do this, it's planned, and I'm not mocking that, because I think that has its place. It's just that we have to have our goal there, and some people start at X and Y and Z, but we still know where we're going.
I'd like to add a comment to that. I think her comment about tolerance for chaos is very well taken. To create something, I think you have to have a period of chaos, and I think there are a couple of things going on. I think there are fairly large segments of the population, families with children, who are real anxious to move into this world. When I first moved to Missoula, my husband moved me back here because he's from Montana. There was one school that was not a public school, and it was the Catholic school. And then there was Sussex, and for a long time, that was it. Now look down that list in the phone book. There are lots of them, and there are more coming. And it's because there are a lot of people who are really ready for this. But I also think that if we're talking as citizens and as taxpayers, we've got to be willing to tolerate a certain level of failures, because you do not get, if we demand as taxpayers that everything the public school tries has to succeed, there are going to be very few people in public schools who are accountable to taxpayers willing to try anything.
Good point.
Very good.
And when we talk from this point of view, it creates a feeling in many classroom teachers that my gosh, don't they see all the good things that are going on out there? And I guess I'm here to say that's true. There are wonderful things going on, and I see that all over the county. And so I think that if words of challenge can be heard in a certain tolerance for just where we need to be going, and there are just really outstanding things going on, and more folks out there who want to keep moving and keep it going.
Well, we still have 5 more minutes, so, I mean, legally, Jason donated this space today for us free to meet here, and I wanted to thank him too, with Debbie, because it's very generous of him to give us the space at the Crystal.
I think it's really generous of all of you to get together on a panel. My name is Debbie Fosnack, and as a parent, I think the words that came out tonight, fear of the unknown, definitely expresses the atmosphere that I witnessed at the last school board meeting of District 1 School Board, and the showing of principals from around Missoula. And so I guess I'd like to pose a question to this panel. Given that the nature of school-centered decision-making is so very threatening to everybody, and given that it's new, we're in uncharted waters, maybe each of you could give your top 3 best pep talk thoughts you might have to help reassure the direction we're going. I realize we're heading quickly to the year 2000. My 8-year-old doesn't have 10 years as far as I'm concerned. I want to see the current leaders in the schools, not the ones who graduate from a re-changed Department of Education and University, but the ones who are sitting behind the desk tomorrow morning, to get a clearer message, to feel a little more reassurance, to have more information maybe right here from us or from some source that helps them say, okay, it could happen in the next couple of years. If there's one mom in my district, if there's one father in my district, if there's one child in my district who wants something changed a little bit, the school board decided that site-based management is now mandated, that the schools are to give it an attempt. The question now is how? How do they allow their teachers and parents and kids to come together and form a school council? Without any direction, these poor principals, as everyone kind of can imagine, that intense level of paranoia is all I can generate to describe what I saw. And I think if we want to see it happen, if the public wants a little more change, what are your ideas to help those particular leaders in that particular arena feel more comfortable in that position of generating change.
For one, I know that there are models existing in Missoula, Sussex, Shining Mountain, Avalon, that do function as a parent they function as parent cooperatives. They're very decision-making, from what I've seen at Sussex, is very comfortable, very effective, very supportive. It is not based on any kind of adversarial philosophy. It is wholesome. And one way to approach kind of breaking the ice, getting into the mode of change would be to attend meetings where decision making is going on very effectively with parents, teachers, students, administrators. I think that would certainly help. It's not such a frightening thing. To just add on to that, there is also kind of an American mindset where we set, blinders, limiting what we look at as viable models to what exists in America now, and there are certainly models in other parts of the world that have been functioning quite well without the benefit of our American system, that do not depend on the same hierarchical administration that we're used to, and it's just a matter of educating ourselves to other ways of doing things.
I think one way would be to not only view the other models, although if you come in with a particular mindset, I'm not sure that that's going to be real productive. I think perhaps one step that could be taken would be to start some workshops in one I took this summer was called futures planning, but more or less the kind of thing that the lady before was talking about, where they brought all of the parties together and people started listing their concerns, their goals, their fears, what the roadblocks to these things are, what they see as the potential assets to them, and start getting it out in the open. Nobody's going to change minds or allay fears unless you get them out in the open and start talking about them. So I think perhaps bringing in somebody from the outside who is neutral and starting the process of a really honest dialogue in a fairly structured way might help.
I think that has merit. But one of the you said what would I tell principals or my cohorts? I remind them that one of the things that we are most concerned about, it seems like, is sometimes the student achievement, I guess, but mostly it's getting parents involved. Research tells us the more our parents are involved, the higher the kids achieve. I think Mike mentioned that a while ago. And it's true, they do. The more our parents are involved in our schools, the better our kids are doing, the better behaved they are, and better support we get from the parents, and those kind of things. And that's what we are striving for all the time. We sit around and drink coffee once in a while, and we talk about that. School-based improvement or site-based management or whatever you want to call it does involve parents. It does get them familiar with the programs. It gets them to support, what's going on in the schools. And to me, it's a natural bridge, getting parents involved. And maybe that's what we need to really stress with the principals and the administrators and superintendents around too, is that this is a real important and a real good way of getting people involved in our schools. They also vote for mill levies and things like that too. So that's a spin on
it. I'm much more direct, I think. This has to do with trust.
And if a principal, I mean, you're not going to mandate it. A state superintendent isn't. Parents are going to come in and say, by Jiminy, we want it, and immediately those bars and that trust level is going to go like, not me. They can mandate it, but I'm going to be a block. No matter what happens here, I'm going to somehow mess it up because they're not comfortable. It's not their comfort zone. So what do you do to break down and to build trust and get them into a little bit different comfort zone? You don't send them off to Sussex schools. They don't buy it. I mean, come on, let's be honest. They don't buy it yet. Doesn't mean that Sussex School isn't a wonderful, great school. I think it is, but they don't buy it. So you don't send them there. But what you do, you go find some articles from the school administrator's book. And you say, you know, they're talking about site-based decision-making here in that school administrator's book. Now, he trusts that, because that's one of them. Right? Then, the school board members say, you know, there's this article in the school board's publication about site-based decision-making. He trusts that. They're like him. You know, they're all those same guys that are white middle class and think the same. So he's going to believe that article. He's going to trust that article. So you begin by getting in there by what he or she trusts. And then once you've started them thinking a little differently, then you start saying, how about an opportunity to go over with me today to Sussex School? It was like that article you read in SAM, School Administrators of Montana. And you begin to build that trust and that belief very slowly, very calculated. You have to do that because I'm here to tell you, we're not going to mandate it. It's not going to happen until you have your school board members really believe in it and until they can trust. You're not going to see that change occur before your child is out of high school. But it's also a responsibility we have to educate them. And first at the level of their trust. School Administrators Magazine, I brought to, this is Share the Power, that's out of the Montana School Boards Association publication, Share the Power. They'd read that one because it's from their own. But building that trust takes time, and you can't force it because they will be sure to build the roadblocks as I'm sitting here.
I'm going to change the tone a little bit on this. I was a principal for 7 years and tried to change as I worked. And I sat down this afternoon with the spokesman for the principals in School District 1 and asked him, how are you folks feeling about this change? And he said, we really support it. He said, sure, not everyone is out there beating it, but we feel that it is worthy, and we as a group of principals want to be involved in how it's structured. And we want to know what the expectations are, and we want to know and we want to know how soon that's going to happen, and we want to get clear concepts from the board and superintendent as to what that's going to be. And so there was a concern expressed about mandates and having to do it just one way, and I guess there's a part of me that says those are good questions for us to look at. One, because being a principal can be a really lonely, isolated job. I'm telling you, it is. I have felt. I remember so many times feeling by myself, and so I call up people like Ed Courtney, and so what I'm saying is that principals need their support system too, and if we want to help them develop new habits of heart and mind, we have to give that opportunity to them, and do that through really retraining them. Because what we're talking about now are principals that are conflict resolvers, public speakers, folks that can help a group reach a strong feeling of group consensus. And we're talking about folks that are in some ways visionary, I think, Ed, and so we are talking about something really different, and So I sense in the principals that I work with a willingness, but they're saying, give us some help in how to do it, give us some backing and support,